Fit to window.
Okay, I think we're rolling now. So welcome out to a new year of training. And our goals in training are really kind of dual. One of them is to educate you, because we know you're going to be the person in your ward or branch that's the person everybody turns to when they have questions. And so we want to help you be as educated as possible. And then, of course, the other side of it is actual training on how to do things. And so this week's training, the first one of this month, is one of these educational ones, because there's been so many changes in temple reservations and all the ins and outs of it. I felt it was a good time to go back over this again. It's a topic that we visited before, but we need to visit again. So with that said, the first thing we need to realize is that to understand where we are in this reservation ordinances system, we need to know where we came from and where we're headed. That's a nice sign up in Anchorage, Alaska, that shows going off to everywhere under the sun, from Frankfurt to Brussels to Honolulu to Moscow from there, because it's like being from the North Pole. Okay, where we came from. Back until 1960, the key record for temple ordinances was called the TIB file. A few of us that have been around for a long time remember the TIB file, which is temple or I can't remember now what it stands for.
Temple Index Bureau.
Index Bureau, right? Temple Index Bureau. They were little 3x5 cards that they tried to record everything for a person on. And the reason they went to this was because back in 1943, we had about 750,000 submissions that year. 320,000 of those submissions were duplicates. That's pushing like 40% of all the names that were submitted in 1943 were duplicates. And so the church has been concerned about that issue forever, literally. And so they've tried to develop systems that will cut down on the number of duplicates. And in those days, we had to go through ward examiners, and then things had to be sent to Salt Lake and then sent back to us, which took usually several months before a name that we had requested to do would finally be available for us. And so the other side of the equation is trying to speed up the time it takes for us to be able to do a name that we want to submit. So things have changed a lot. So Family Search's goals today are basically to simplify the reservation process as much as possible, limit hoarding of names, because that does go on, help families do their family names, and simplify the record keeping and improve the spirit inside the temple. Some of the changes that they've made just recently were partly driven by the fact that the temple desk, the ordinance desk, became such a place of controversy and bad feelings that the church felt that needed to be removed from inside the temple. And so some of these changes are for that reason, to improve the spirit inside the temple. Okay, so I thought maybe a quick little historical review would be in order, and this is quite a bit on this page. I'll just try to gloss over these. If we go back just 10 years ago, basically 2 to 4% of the members of the church did all the submitting. Names lagged behind. We didn't have as many names being submitted as we were doing in the temple, so they did the extraction program. There were mainly a few high volume submitters in most stakes, and they did the bulk of all the submitting in an entire stake. Most of the members' training was done in a classroom environment, and it really was only a limited success, this classroom setup that they had. And family history was considered something for the old people. About 10 years ago, they started calling consultants. The problem was at first, the calling really wasn't well defined and there wasn't much there to help the people. Duplication was still a huge concern. They were beginning to reduce that problem, but they still had some major issues going on. There were few records online as opposed to today. So research was challenging, but it was getting better. And Family Search stood alone in competition with other large genealogy sites. What I mean by that is Family Search stood out by itself in competition with Ancestry, in competition with MyHeritage, and that was not a good arrangement. And everybody knew that. Okay, now the number of submitters has grown tremendously. I would say the average stake probably has 15 to 25% of their members submitting yearly. The consultants using originally Find, Take, Teach, now Discover, Gather, Connect have learned to work one-on-one with patrons, and that has made a tremendous change in the culture of the church and how Family Search is viewed, and how family history is viewed. And so now family history is more for everybody, for the young and the old, not just the old. The hoarding of ordinances still occurs, but Family Search is putting in systems, putting in programs that will slowly but surely eliminate that hoarding. New ordinance features have been introduced to enable members to take names of the temple. Think of temple ready, ordinances ready. And also the goal of under 5% duplication is really a reachable goal now. And I think they believe it's somewhere around that right now. More records are online than ever before, with billions of new records digitized every year. You know, the church just finished digitizing all the rolls of microfilm, and in the near future, they'll all be online. And really important, today Family Search works with their partners hand in hand to help everybody have a better experience. And what that does in the end is provides us with even more records that we can use and utilize to build our pedigrees than what Family Search alone could put out. And so things have really changed even in just the last 10 years. So let's look at some of these changes. The first thing, they've tried to reduce the number of reservation status symbols down to 4. The green basically means that that's a name that's okay to reserve. It meets the reservation standards. It could be one, though, that needs permission if it's in the 110-year rule, or if it's already reserved by somebody else, you can request it, but you'll only get a limited amount of time to get the work done. In progress, it means that it's being reserved by somebody else. It may be in the person's reserved list, or it could be shared with their family, and we'll talk about that. That's a new system, or printed. And your own names are shown in blue. The names that you have reserved will show up as blue. Orange, basically they say it means cannot request. Generally, that means it's lacking some kind of qualifying information. The dates, the places, and things like that maybe are non-standard or missing. And there's some kind of a problem maybe with the name, with say characters that aren't approved to be in there, or words being used as part of a name like child that the system doesn't accept. And sometimes there are records that are actually restricted. You can't do the ordinance because there's a restriction on that particular ordinance. And then the gray one, completed, is kind of tricky because it means basically that the ordinance has already been done, and if you hover over it, you should get a date. But for the children who died before the age of 8, it will tell you they're not needed. So it really should say completed, not needed. Those are basically the 4 colors. that we use. The green ones, we know there's two versions of the green. The regular green temple, that means that that person's qualified for temple work. Those are getting harder to find in the system because there are so many people looking for names to reserve, but they're still out there. What you'll find more often than not, though, is the green temple with the clock. That means that this name's already reserved by somebody else, but they have shared it with the temple. And when they do that, everybody in the system is able to then go in and reserve that name, take that name to be done. Okay, there's a couple of catches though. If you choose to take that name, you can't then turn around and share it because it's already being shared. And the second thing is you will be limited to 90 days to get it done. If you don't do it within 90 days, it goes back into the system at this level of being a shared ordinance to the temple. It'll go back to the same place in its waiting list to get done. And it'll again be ready for anybody that comes along that wants to grab it and do it. That's what happens if you fail to get it done within 90 days. Now, your temple list has changed over the last year somewhat. And for some of you, you'll have now a section in there where it talks about family groups. And this is a brand new program that Family Search has started out. If you haven't entered a family group yet, just ignore that. And what your temple list will look like is reservations, shared, completed, ordinances ready, and then a statement of reservation policy. And you'll notice the numbers are out to the side of the grouping telling you how many lines of names you have under that category. Okay, so we'll talk about these different groups a little bit because this is where things can be a little bit confusing. My reservations mean those names that you've reserved and you've done nothing else to them. You're not sharing them or anything. You're reserving them with the intention that you're going to do them. Those names you're allowed 2 years to do. If you do something with them, if you do the baptisms, you will get a 1-year extension. You only get one 1-year extension. You don't get an extension each time you do a different ordinance. So you're either going to have it for 2 years or a max of 3 before you get it done. So if you do it once for, do some ordinance work on it, you will get that extra year. Just in the last couple of months, they have now set a maximum of 300 lines of my reservations. If you exceed 300 people in your My Reservations category, you'll no longer be allowed to do reservations. You'll be stopped from making any reservations. That locks you out. You can do other things within your ordinance lists, but you're not going to be able to add anything to your ordinances. You're not going to be able to share and put something over in shared that you didn't have before. Because before you share it, you have to reserve it, and you're not going to be allowed to reserve. So that's a major change. And the key to that is they're trying to stop people from hoarding. They still have people that have hundreds of thousands of names. And they've got to get this to stop because it's backlogging things. It's also taking away people's opportunities to do stuff. So anyway, My Reservations limited to 300. If you belong to a family group and your family group is sharing names, then you can share some of your names to the family group, but those names don't leave your My Reservations category. I mean, they're in a family group now shared where the people in the family group can use them, but they still count against your My Reservations. So you're still going to be limited to 300. Even if you put 100 over in the family group category, those 100 still count as part of your My Reservations. And the group is limited to having 1,000 lines. And then as time goes, if the people don't use up those names, then when the clock hits the 2-year mark, they will then become shared with the temple. So that's basically what's happening there. Now, shared with the temple, there's no expiration. Once you share them, they get to stay there. At this time, you can have as many as you want. Notice I said this time. Ron Tanner has talked about they are going to institute a limit on your shared number also. It'll probably be a big number, a couple of thousand or something like that, but they are going to limit how many you can share also, trying to allow more people the opportunity to submit. Okay, treat the shared names like your bank account. Put all your temple ordinances that you're reserving that you don't plan on doing in the very near future over in the shared category. This allows people that are out there to find names that they can do. They won't count against your 300 lines. And so this can be your bank account. And then whenever you need something, you can go into your bank account and withdraw a name that has the ordinance that you need. Okay, then there's the completed list that some of us may not even be aware of. What the church is doing is as you complete the names or other people complete them for you, these names are placed in the completed list and they remain there for 2 years from the date of the last ordinance that was done on them. After 2 years, they're removed. But there's a catch. If you have a lot of names in a reservation list, you could easily have more than 3,000 names get completed during a 2-year period. And if that happens, you're only allowed to see the last 3,000 names that were cleared, they're completed. And so the new ones that get completed bump the old ones off the list. So they may not actually stay there for 2 years. They're working on trying to develop a system where you can download this information easily and have a way to store it. Right now, you can do a copy and paste of the information, put it in documents and save them, and it'll show you all the ordinances. Now, when we're talking about these lines, this is what we're talking about. Here's a piece of my reservation list, and there's 4 lines there. Don't get blown away by all the ordinances over here. We're not talking about 4 ordinances. We're talking about 4 lines of people. And people can show up once or twice, or maybe more if they have more spouses. But normally people will show up once or twice. Lily is here for her individual ordinances, and she's down to the endowment. She's also on the next line down with Howard because they were married, and the sealing to spouse is a separate line. And so for some people, they all count 2 lines. And this is what we're talking about under My Reservations. If you reach a total of 300, and I only have 27, if you reach 300, that will then stop you from being able to reserve anymore. So this is how the system is working. This is what they're looking at. How many entries are there in your reservation list? That's what lines are. Okay, the clock is stopped. You know, we've been doing a lot of talking about this clock, the 2-year clock, the 90-day clock. Well, there is no clock right now. The top entry that you see on this page was reserved on the 8th of April in 2020. And on the 24th of November in November of 2021, it shows 2 years from that date till it expires, which means it's actually got well over 2 years from when it originally was reserved, because right now they've set everything that is reserved and just regular reservation at 2 years, and each day that clock will change. So like the next day, it would say expired on the 24th of 25th of November. Then the next day, the 26th of November, and so on. And so I've also shown you one on the bottom here, which was a name that I reserved during the COVID time when everything got shut down. And so what they did there is they just say it was reserved on a certain date and it expires on a certain date. Well, what they're going to do when the temples all reopen fully, and we're at 95% now, we've only got 5% of our temples to go, so it's not going to be that much longer. They will then recalculate everything. And if you have a name that's a 2-year reservation, you'll be given 2 full years from the date the clock starts to go, even though you may not have had 2 years left. And on the 90-day ones, they will guarantee you that you have 90 days from the date that the clock starts. So they're going to adjust things so that you don't get in a situation like, well, the clock starts today and it's being cleared out of there tomorrow. You're not going to have that kind of a situation occur. They're going to allow for that so that there's plenty of time for you to finish up your reservations. Okay, so why the 300 reservation limit? Back in 2012, the First Presidency wrote a letter and they asked us to release the names in a timely manner of the names that you couldn't do in a short period of time. Most of us paid attention to that, and a lot of people didn't. And so because many people didn't, the churches finally had to take matters into their own hands, and they developed this 30 or 300 reservation limit that you have. And the key thing to it is share the surplus ones with the temple. That's all you've got to do to get out of the problem. If you get into the position of having 300 reserved, unreserve some of them or share them with the temple so that you can then add some new names into your list. Okay, questions on the 300 limit? Well, I know if I've reached it. Yes, because they put numbers on your reservation list of how many are in each category. So you can look at my reservations and see how many. And what if my reservation list already has over 300? You're no longer reserving names. It's as simple as that. So move some into the shared so you can reserve some more. And then what happens when you reach the reservation limit? The reservation program just will not work for you. And does sharing family names lower the amount in my reservations? Yes, it does. If you use the system for sharing with friends and family through emails or messaging. It doesn't change if you share the names in the family group program. And we'll show you that in just a couple of minutes. And then after I reach the limit, how do I keep track of family names that I might want to reserve later? In other words, you're finding more names now, but you can't reserve them. Put their IDs in a notebook or possibly another system that you can use, the system in Family Search, and click following on each of these people. And then under following, you can set a label that says add the temple reservation or something like that on it. And then you can go to that list and find all the people you're following that says reserve this person and go reserve them. So there is that system that you can use. Okay, notifying people. If you're going to share names with people, they need to have in their notifications shared temple ordinances turned on. If they don't have that turned on, they're not going to be able to receive a request from you to take some names to do. So be sure if you're going to share with somebody, tell them they've got to go up into their settings and make sure that under notifications that shared temple ordinances is turned on like it is here. Okay, so if you have names in your reservation list and you want to share them with somebody, the way we've been doing it all along, and I'm sorry I didn't set this page up better, you're going to want to go to your reservations, click on a name that you want to share, and then click the share button, and then share with an individual. And when you click share with an individual, you'll get this little document that comes up where it has your name. You put the name of the person in here that you're going to share this ordinance with, and then provide their email. And then you click send, and the name gets sent to that person. If they've said they'll accept those kind of messages. That's why you have to have that checked. There is another way to do it, and this is over in our messaging system. When we're in our messaging system, all we have to do is click new message and name the person we're going to name for this message to go to. And then there's a little temple sign down there. Click on the temple, and then click on the names that you want to share from your reservation list, and then click share, and the message will be sent to them. Either one of those two ways takes the name, if they accept it, out of your reservation list and lowers the number of people that you have in your reservation list, and will help you get below that 300 number. Okay, now family groups. Now, if you go up where your name is and you click on your name, you're going to find that there is a family groups notice there. If you click on that, you're not going to see the bottom part of this. You're going to see family groups, create a group by clicking on create group. And then there's just a couple of steps. I've gone through it and set it up, even put a picture in for our family. Okay, then to view the group, you just click view group, and the group comes up, the picture's still there, and you see the names of the people that are in your group, and there's a little group reservation system. This allows you to set up some reservations that only the people in this group can grab. To get the names in there, what you do is you go to My Reservations, and then you pick some people, like I picked some people here, and then you click share. But when you click share, this time you say share with the group, and it will then ask you which group you want to share it to, because right now you can only belong to one group, but eventually they're going to let you be in, I think they said possibly 3 groups. Then so if you had more than one group, you'd have to know which group you wanted to share these names with. And then they're in the group. Now, this is the Givens family group list. And the names that I have shared with the group are in blue. That's actually blue. And the ones that other people have submitted are in green. And to use these names, all we have to do is click on a name and then either click print or reserve for later. In other words, it would take it out of here and put it in our personal list for 90 days. So I clicked on Maria, and then I'll click on either print or reserve for later. Okay, so final word on these extensions of reservations, just to make sure we're clear. Ordinances that are shared through Temple Ready, emails, and family groups expire in 90 days once the clock gets started. If you don't do it, they go back to the original reserver or to the temple if they're shared with the temple at that point. The 2-year reservations can be extended 1 year if some of the work is done, but notice that sealing to spouses don't get extended because there's no prior ordinance for them. They stand alone. So if you have the person's individual ordinances to do and the sealing to spouse, if you do some of those individual ordinances, the person's going to have a total of 3 years to get done, but that sealing to spouse still has to get done within 2 years. So be aware of that. Names placed in a family group ordinance list retain their 2-year time period to get completed. And when a group member takes the name, they get that 90-day clock. Now, ordinance expiration date is not affected by sharing the ordinances with friends or family groups. They still have that 2-year period to get done. The person that gets them has whatever's left on the 2 years to do them. Now, 3 weeks before the expiration of an ordinance, you'll get a notice that it's going to expire. And then also at its expiration, the ordinances are automatically flipped over to shared with the temple. A notice will get sent to you that the reservation has expired. You can, if you choose, re-reserve this person if the work hasn't been grabbed by somebody else already. And if you want to avoid the system, we all know that one of the things you can do is to unreserve it and then re-reserve it, just before it expires. And you can get away with it, kind of breaking the system. Notice that it might not always get shared, because if it was no longer qualifying for some reason, it's not going to be shared. And if the person was born inside the 110-year rule and you'd gotten it through the 110-year reservation program, it will not go to the temple for shared with the temple. It'll go back to available. Okay, an ordinance is ready. Just the last thing on it. Remember, it only works with your gender. You're limited by ordinance type, how many you can do. You always only get 90 days. And currently you've got to print the cards out. You can't take the phone and show the desk. Does not work that way right now. Okay, the way they pull names for ordinances ready has changed slightly because of some other changes. It starts by pulling from your reservation list. Then it pulls from names you've shared with a family group. Then it pulls from names shared to a family group you're in that somebody else had submitted there. Then it goes to names you've shared with the temple. Then to names that are related to you that are shared by other patrons in your tree. 6, it goes to the green temples that are out there. It'll go back 10 generations and down 5, looking for names. And finally, if it can't find anything else, it'll just give you an unrelated name that's in tree that needs to be done. So again, lastly, please do your due diligence. Don't just grab the name and run, but maybe do a little looking at it, see if there's anything you can do to help it. Okay, I hope this helps you. It's a fast run through, and I'm sure it's probably been confusing, but that's why we record these, so that you'll know